agenda started if that happens?
No, we've been missing 3 commissions.
Yeah.
Is that the first, her first grandchild then?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Probably.
Thank you.
It's like I had it in here. Local for the national.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
So we'll go ahead and get started with the June 28th work session of the Waxhaw Town Board. Call the meeting to order. In terms of the agenda, while the items are going to remain the same due to a scheduling conflict, item number 1 will be the residential aesthetics controls, and Lisa, the manager, and Lisa McCarter will be doing the presentation and leading the discussion on that. But other than that, the agenda items remain the same. So I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, Lisa and Warren, residential aesthetics controls. And just as an FYI, this came about because of some noise level that popped up with the placement of a modular home across from South Piedmont, just up from the public works site. So to make sure that we're all on the same page and we have a good understanding of what is allowed, where the state law comes in, et cetera, we put it on the agenda so Lisa and Warren and Chaplin could educate us, because it's a combination of local and state law. So
Well, that's pretty much the introduction, and it's the difference between a modular home, which is built to state building code standards, and a manufactured home, which is built to HUD standards, and our ability to regulate. The home in question, if you were to look at it, looks like a mobile home, but technically it's not. So that's where the discussion started. Chaplin and I talked, and he's done some research on our ability to regulate aesthetic controls or not throughout town, not just in the downtown. So, and Lisa McCarter's here to add background too.
Correct. The first thing you have to do, well, first you always look at use and make sure that the structure is going to be used for residential, because if it's used for commercial purposes as opposed to residential, sometimes you can have a modular unit that's going to be used for commercial. We did not have to amend our downtown or our UDO, including the downtown code, regarding commercial architectural standards. So that's always the first, is what you do there. Look to the use. The second is you have to look at the difference between a manufactured and a modular home. The industry's gotten pretty smart. They look somewhat similar, but one has a HUD sticker or certification, and the other has one through the state building code. You can even take it a little bit deeper according to the case law. There's also a 5-part test that you can look. So even if someone tries to classify it as a modular, you can look at a few factors other than how it was delivered. And one of those is something that Commissioner Warner talked about, was the underlining how you place a structure, and that's one of the 5 factors. And certainly we're going to make sure that staff looks at the 5 factors, but most of the time it's going to fall into the modular home. And manufactured homes expressly are allowed to be governed by statute. You're allowed to have an overlay district. You're not allowed to preclude manufactured homes, which a lot of people think of as mobile homes, throughout the municipal limits, but you can restrict, and that is one area that they actually allow architectural standards on, ironically. We have done that. That is in section 6 of our UDO. I think it's 6.1. So if this structure were to be classified as a manufactured, it would have to go there. The facts that we have now, we'll look a little deeper, but it's unlikely. But we're going to have this, and I'm going to make sure that staff has this memo going forward. So anytime this issue comes up, we're going to be able to look at those factors quickly and make that rule. One thing they did with the modular homes is they were starting to get regulated. This was about 10 or 15 years ago, and they were like, well, rather than have 50 municipalities regulate us, we're building in one factory. We're going to get a state statute. So they did, and there's a state statute that also sets forth 4 requirements to meet the North Carolina definition. So that's another area that we're going to have to look at. It has to have a certain roof pitch, eave projection, a minimum height of your exterior wall, and then the siding and roofing materials must be similar to what you would see in or compatible with a residential structure. So and then foundations is the last factor. I'm sorry, I'd already mentioned that, but coming back, foundations is you have to have a foundation on one of these. You can't have the tongue sticking out to make it traditionally still a movable object. The good news, which I think is where I hand it over to Lisa McCarter, is the North Carolina legislator, I think it was a year and a half ago, severely limited architectural standards for residential. They pretty much said you can't do it. They had a few limited exceptions, public health and safety, which is hard to do because usually that's going to be building codes, but they had something about floodplains, which is also very regulated, and those are model statutes. And then they have 2 more. One is your local historic district, which we don't have, and the final one is your historic district on your National Register of Historic Places. And I know we have one of those, but I don't have the particular map, and I didn't prepare it. Well, I was going to let Lisa prepare that part. And basically, the good news is, going forward, Lisa can show you where this area is and confirm our designation. But we could adopt amendments to our UDO. We should not focus on or differentiate between modular and stick-built, because really the building industry doesn't. State statutes don't, because they still have to comply with all the building code regulations of a building per our building code. But we could focus on the aesthetics, and I think you can explain the district and confirm we do have the designation.
So I passed out, I don't know if this is on.
Should be.
I passed out the National Register district, and the property that brought this up is right outside. It's kind of to the south west of College Street. So, but the National Historic Register district going forward as we create the new UDO is an area where we can still have the single family aesthetic regulations. So that's where the posters that were about the character of Waxhaw would come into play with single family homes. Also, I passed out a zoning map, and you can see where the mobile home overlay is on Waxhaw Marvin. So, you know, we can require skirting around the bottom of mobile homes and front porches on the mobile homes or manufactured homes. So these are things we're looking at for our new UDO.
So the bottom line is, in this case, that this property fell outside the historic district. So what tools does the town have if it chose to regulate the look, to regulate it?
We can still do height and bulk requirements. We can't do building materials. We can't do roof pitches or where the windows and doors are located.
But we can make sure that it complies with the North Carolina statute, make sure this wasn't a modular home built in Texas, because it could happen, and somebody ship it to Texas standards or South Carolina standards without knowing the exemption from North Carolina with their roof pitches, and we will look into that. But Lisa's right, we're limited in this with the modular home because they're pretty much considered stick built in most instances.
Can you say more about size and bulk, what you meant by that?
So the height of the building we can control, how big it is we can control. Like they're looking at the heights for downtown, maybe we want to limit it to 3 stories. And then also, you know, whether they're alley fed, how they're oriented. So you can limit that. Usable yard space, things like that.
Any questions?
To the best of my knowledge, the unit that we're talking about it was a daycare there before, and I'm assuming they're going to use it for daycare again. So that would not be considered residential. Is that correct?
That would not be residential. What I've seen is that it was supposed to be residential.
Right.
For the owner's mother to live there.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't intended to revert to the daycare.
No, and if it was, then they don't have a permit for that.
Okay.
Can I give another example and just ask a question? So when I first started about a year ago, there was a rumor that someone was going to build a residential structure that's going to look like a Quonset hut, which is like, think Marine Corps barracks. Okay, so is that sort, what's our ability to regulate that sort of thing outside of a national historic district? Is there anything beyond what you said that we could do to regulate that?
There is, it says in the statute, and correct me if I'm getting off, Chaplain, but that if the owner agrees to it or the applicant agrees to it, then you can impose it.
Yes, and one of the ways you can do that is to, which is something we're moving away from, but, well, conditional use permit, but conditional zoning, which we are still doing to some extent. So they would consent to certain conditions, and sometimes they'll do this. A lot of areas are going to be restricted by their covenants, but this is mainly an issue or problem in the infill because these older properties traditionally didn't have covenants, especially not with architectural standards back at that time. So your newer areas with newer subdivisions, they're all going to have architectural standards recorded before the houses get built, but this is more of an infill issue.
What is the square footage of that house?
I'm not sure, but I don't think it's very big. It looks pretty narrow, long.
It's probably in the 500 square foot range, 12 by 30 or something like that.
Just a
point-
reminder, everybody speak into the microphone for Nick's sake.
Oh, yeah. This is a, being in the construction field for many years, there's nothing wrong with a modular home. There's some very high quality houses. I think 80% of the houses in Sweden are built out of modular because they're built in a plant. I think the quality of modular homes in this country is poor, but there are some good ones, so you cannot regulate them out.
Any other questions?
So with Studio Cascade is familiar, obviously, with the aesthetic limitations with the state statutes, and so
Yes.
what are they going to recommend along the lines of addressing some of the concerns that we've heard, if anything, with this type of construction?
I think that they're really getting into character, maybe landscaping, things like that. We are really limited as to materials, unfortunately, but we're still putting an emphasis on what we can with the commercial, if multifamily comes through, and things that aren't single-family residential.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you for educating us. Okay. Next up, downtown parking opportunities. Presenter is Kurt White.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon. So today I'm going to provide an update on downtown parking. As everyone remembers, in April we completed the parking study with Kimley Horn, and with that came 3 or 4 key findings as well as a bunch of implementation recommendations. And so a lot of those implementation recommendations were going to be considered a little bit further down the line later in the coming fiscal year. But since then, we have been approached by 3 property owners downtown with some proposals that, to varying degrees, fit in with some of the short-term implementation opportunities in the parking study. So what I wanted to do today was to put those 3 proposals into context with the parking study recommendations, and then actually make a recommendation, 2 recommendations, and then look for some consensus from the board about which way to go moving forward. So, is there an on button? Sorry,
Is it on the side?
on the side. Oh, there we go. It says on. Okay, thanks. All right, apologize for that.
Need new batteries again?
Yeah, is there batteries? Yeah, the laser pointer's working, but oh, like it's gonna
He's
be a
gonna-
lot because it's okay.
Let me see that.
Very good. Just want to test it, see this. Let's just get it closer. Let's stick with that. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll do our best. So first, I kind of went over this now, and then the one other thing is there are some long-term topics that I would like to remind the board that will need to be considered at another point. So the parking study. There were three key findings in the parking study. First of all, there was a parking utilization analysis, looking at how and where parking was being used downtown. Second, Kimley Horn looked at the impact that events have on downtown parking. And then the third thing they looked at was the safety component. So I wanted to briefly remind everyone about that so it's fresh as we consider the recommendations I'll make. So the methodology that was used to look at parking utilization was as follows. The consultant divided up the downtown into 11 parking sectors, and essentially they're blocks or variations of blocks. And you see the red numbers. Those are the sector numbers, so there's 11 sectors, and then the black smaller numbers are the approximate number of parking spaces in each one of the sectors. And then the consultant actually looked at the responses from the downtown parking survey, which had over 100 citizen responses, as to what were the highest occupancy times in downtown for parking. And the consensus was that it's between 11 and 1 p.m. and 5 and 7 p.m. Note, these are on non-event days. So the consultant actually did counts on 3 separate dates that you see there above you. And the interesting thing to note, one back, please, Nick. Sorry about that. One back, please. The interesting thing to note is that in no case does the total occupancy even reach 50% as a whole for downtown. Now, in individual sectors, there's higher demand, but overall, of the available approximately 461 spaces, we were not even at 50% occupancy on those times. And the rule of thumb is generally once you hit 80 to 90% occupancy is when you actually start reaching a point where additional parking is going to be necessary. And so now you can move forward, Nick. And so the conclusion was that Waxhaw is not at a point where we are where we need additional parking. But the opportunity for improvement is in the distribution of that parking. And so if you look at the next slide, you see here that I know it's a little bit hard to see, but essentially where the red is, that's 80 to 90%, 80 to 100% occupancy, and the places where that's occurring is here on South Main in front of the Rippingtons and Provisions, here on South Main in front of Maxwell's. So even though parking is never reaching a threshold in the whole downtown parking system that requires more parking, in the individual sectors, the supply is not being distributed efficiently. So,
Can you, just a quick question, just refresh my, my memory. For section 3, was the gravel lot considered part of parking or not?
gravel lot was not considered parking because it's not currently being used
Okay.
as that. Okay, and now we can move forward here. So, the second thing we looked at was events, or the second key finding was related to events. And I'll preface this by saying this is events in context with parking. Needless to say, events provide a huge benefit to the town in terms of tourism and economic development and quality of life, but from a parking perspective, that is the only strain on the parking system and staff specifically as it relates to police. The parking study found in almost, even after sponsorships, about an $80,000 investment each year from the town to put on the events.
To park at the event? This is just a parking expense?
To total costs for events.
Okay.
And the reason that's relevant is that you'll see that one of the recommendations will be to charge for parking. So, and the third thing was safety. So, pedestrian safety on South Main Street was identified as a concern, and particularly along the angled parking on the opposite side of the street from the restaurants. Some solutions that can be discussed for that will be part of the TAP grant design process. But in the short term, and Nick, I think I have the batteries here. Nope. So, yeah. Okay, we'll just keep moving forward without it. Okay, next, please. So we've been approached by 3 property owners downtown in the past several months for varying proposals. They've come to us, and the Women's Club was an outside agency request earlier in the spring, and the Clock Shop and the Palamedes lot kind of came to us just unsolicited, and we came across them. And so I'm going to discuss these as some possible short-term implementation opportunities for the parking study recommendations, with the Women's Club and the Clock Shop being the ones that staff would recommend. The Women's Club agreement is a shared parking agreement. What shared parking is it's a situation where 2 different uses are utilizing the same parking during different times of day. So, for example, the BB&T building at night downtown, banks close at 5, no one's parking there, so shared parking would be if they were to allow some parking there for the other uses in downtown, whether it's the brewery or the restaurants, or in the case of the Women's Club, the same kind of scenario when the Women's Club is not operating, that it would allow some of the overflow from other uses to use that space. What it does is it really creates a more efficient distribution of supply, which is, as we saw in the previous slides, the issue is not really overall occupancy, it's the distribution of that occupancy. So we can move forward. So currently the lot is approximately 92 feet by 109 feet, a little less than 1/3 of an acre, and it has a capacity for approximately 25 cars. The Women's Club came to the town and they requested that the town, and you will note in the printed copies you have, the number is different. I went over a little bit more with Dennis, and we came up with what was originally more of a back of the envelope estimate to a more precise estimate. So the Women's Club proposal, they have asked that the town pave and stripe the lot and actually expand the size of it to all the way back to the tree line, which I'll show you in the map here in a second. But that would actually increase the capacity of the lot a little bit, and to about 30 to 35 cars, and it would also provide a better parking environment for the Women's Club rentals, with the gravel being difficult on a lot of the people who rent the facility, as far as whether it's handicap accessibility or just people wearing high heels. And so this is what the lot is now. If you see the next slide, they want to pave it out to the tree line. They want us to pave it out to the tree line. And what this would do, it would increase the capacity. Next, please. So we've worked with the Women's Club Board over the past 2 or 3 months, and we have come up with a letter of intent. It's not signed yet, pending. Thanks. All right, let's see. Hey, there we go. It works now. Thank you, Melody and Nick. We've worked out a letter of intent. First of all, what would it cost to pave the lot? We got an estimate on that. Several estimates, actually, and the lowest one being $35,900. That was from 3 estimates. And then in return, the town would ask the Women's Club to allow the town to place signage in front of the gravel, or at that time it would be paved lot, that said public parking, except during Women's Club events. And we've also asked to reserve parking exclusively for the town use during 4 of the major town events: Art Kaleidoscope, July 4th, Autumn Treasures, and the Christmas Parade. All of these are, so this is what's acceptable to the Women's Club Board, and they're ready to move forward on these conditions. And so what this would also, the public parking piece would mean anytime there wasn't a formal event from the Women's Club, you could park there. You could go to the Maxwell's, park there on Friday night, as long as there was nothing else going on.
How much additional parking will the mill project bring into the mix? I realize there's going to be shops and everything there. We have any guesstimate at all on that?
I do not know. I do not think it's going to be public, though. I have not.
Okay.
So that's the Women's Club proposal. And the next,
Questions?
yes.
With the Women's Club, and we would have it available to us on days that there is no function.
Yes.
Do we get a minimum number of days in this agreement per year? What if they get the parking lot paved and now all of a sudden it's a much more favorable venue and they're booked every day?
Yes.
How do we address that?
That's a good question. They didn't want to establish a minimum number of total days because it's hard for them to predict their rentals. Currently, though, from July to December, right now, they have it, there are 5 days, 5 weekend days where it is rented in the morning and the evening, and there are 9 days where it's rented on half the day, so either the morning or the evening. It's never rented on Sundays, so that's only Fridays and Saturdays we're talking about.
But again, we don't have any guarantee.
No.
I mean, if it gets really popular, we just paved our lot and we have no spaces.
Right. You're right. As we've left it right now, they did not want to give a guaranteed number of total days. Just the events guarantee and the default days. But I will say that it is only Fridays and Saturdays that they're having these events
Now,
yeah.
but I wouldn't want to do anything unless we had a guarantee that we get a certain minimum number of days or there's some kind of payback. If they can't provide the lot, then we have some equitable, recourse.
Okay. Yep. Sure. Yes.
Is there any amount of days, say for the past year that they have, how many days they've used it?
Yes. So I mentioned what's coming up from July to December, and then from June until now, there was a total of, sorry, it was 25 days between January and December, January and June.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on that particular proposal? And we'll circle back to it.
Just one last question. How does a person going downtown to park have any idea if the women's club is available?
So right now, that's part of the problem actually, is that there's no signage and people don't know if they can park there or not. And so what tends to happen is they just don't. And that what came out in the parking study, that occupancy of that lot was very low. But what would happen is we would put up a sign that said public parking except during women's club event days. And on those event days, the women's club would put up the cones themselves, they've stated, and that they would manage their parking. They would manage that process.
So if you do the math, it's about, right now, between Mondays when nothing's happening and their days, it's about a third of it is out of use. When you do the math. So we have the potential for 2/3.
Right.
Or less.
Yes, that's one way of looking at it, yep.
Mechanics-wise, striping you will get a lot more cars in there if you stripe the parking lot in addition to just paving it. Second of all, I know where the in and out are so close to each other, you can't double stack between the in and out, so it's only single. To me, in order to get the optimum amount of cars in there, you would need to move the exit. You know, and that's more money than the $35,000 because you have to have an apron and all the approach and all that.
Yeah, that's good consideration as well.
Any other questions?
Anything else?
I mean, can I ask a question? As far as staff having direction, is this something that you want us to go back to the women's club for, to try to nail down a number of specific days? Or, and you're not interested in this coming back forward until we see that? I mean, is that the consensus? What's the consensus of the board as far as the next steps on this one?
I think what we heard was some form of a guarantee.
Well, I heard, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Only one person.
Yeah.
I think the financial issue, if they can't give it to us for so many days, if they have a booking over so much, then yes, you'll have to pay us a fee for that day.
Is that clear?
Yes.
I agree with that,
Do-
because as the town grows and more people maybe utilize that, then we're in what we're doing now and maybe not able to change it with them later.
And do we have a specific number you feel comfortable with asking for, or should I just test it and see what they're willing to offer? And
Why don't we see what we can get, and then
Yeah.
if that's not acceptable, then we'll go back.
Just doing some quick math, if you have the thing available 200 days of the year, and there's 35 spaces, that's 7,000 instances. And if it's $35,000 to fix it, that's $5 every time you park there. That's pretty expensive. Now,
So
that's the initial cost.
Right.
Be amortized over a number of years, but still.
And then we also, okay, sure.
Do you need any other direction on that?
I think I'm clear on that.
Okay.
Maybe they should charge
That's good.
I've got a question. With the allocation of days, they're probably using their events more in the evenings and on weekends,
That's when it's always Fridays and Saturdays.
Fridays and Saturdays. Do y'all want a requisite, in addition, do y'all want to break it down, total number of days? I'm just thinking as this moves on to contract, do y'all have a minimum on Saturdays that you want, or do we want it, or is that not our primary problem? I don't know where our primary problem rests, but that's another issue that we need to think and look at.
Looking at the times it's used, I mean, the time the town needs it, basically the lunch crowd during the week. And then on
Dinner.
Saturdays and Sundays is when all the antique crowd is there, and the bar crowd on Friday evening.
Yeah, and I think you got to look at it in the context of the things that we promote downtown. So you have jamming at the track all summer, so it'd be nice to be able to steer cars that way instead of scurrying around the gravel lot, those kind of things. So I don't know if I have no idea if their events seasonal or what, so it's hard to say, Chaplain. Clarification point is on the resurfacing, does it include striping as well, or not?
The cost that you saw?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to close on your question, Jim.
On the permanent signage to announce public parking, how big of a sign would that be? Like this or like this?
Well, it would most likely be something like what you see currently at the corner of McDonald and Broome, the wayfinding one that was established last
Okay.
year,
Yeah.
I believe. It's more like this.
And then they would just cover that up with event parking only when they have an event?
Or they would have, again, the cones or someone out there to
Okay.
manage that. It's just important. It's also what we'll have to work through is just because it says a Friday, sometimes their Friday event is from 11 to 1 on Friday, and it's not the whole day when you see that. A day is not the whole day. But I'll work through that with them. Okay, so that's, I think I'm clear on the direction there. This was just a summary of why we're recommending it. Really, of the three recommendations, or of the three proposals that we're discussing, this is the one that's most consistent with the parking study, because it is a true shared parking agreement where it's not paid parking, it's not establishing a new surface lot, it's not, so it's just redistributing supply. And the location is particularly good for the town's needs, both because of town events and its proximity to the core, and also for the businesses where we have our highest parking needs, the restaurants on South Main and the brewery and the restaurant on North Main. So we skipped around a little bit, but fortunately the clicker's working now. So let's go to the clock shop. The clock shop owner, Kip Heimwall, he approached the town recently and asked for a modification to the current agreement. We currently have an agreement with the clock shop where the town rents the grassy lot right behind the building for event parking. And by rent, it really we pay the local property taxes. So we pay the town of Waxhaw property taxes, and we mow the grass. Public Services mows the grass, and that's all has been asked so far. It's about 25 spaces that we can get out of that during events, pretty packed in there. And what he is asking now is that because the agreement's expiring actually this fiscal year, so the new ask is for, in addition to the payment of the town taxes, for the town to also cover the cost of his county taxes and to continue doing the mowing. Well, fortunately, it's not really an increase though, because the property was revalued. I spoke with Ann, and it's actually going to be less than what he had originally asked. $185 is the total town and county annual taxes for that parcel. So that's what's being asked in exchange for continued use for events, and so that's his ask to us. We're recommending that because, again, it's consistent with the parking study. It's not a pure shared parking agreement, but it is responding to what the parking study identified as the biggest need, which was events parking.
So that's only for events?
That's right.
No other time?
It's only for events. The concern of allowing, now I will say, and people end up parking there if you look on the weekends. It's just he's not explicitly allowing that, but it happens. The reason he doesn't want to officially say that it's full-time public parking is because he's worried that it'll get worn away. The grass it'll just become a mess.
How many spaces?
It's approximately 25, but crammed in there pretty good.
25?
So he's not at, I mean, I can see the brewery and the coffee shop would love to have that parking lot to use every day. But this is not what that's intended to be.
This is events.
Yeah.
This is just continuing an agreement we currently have with a new, just with a new criteria, with a new condition.
Okay.
So we would strongly recommend this one.
Yeah, this, any objections to the 185.58
If annually.
annually?
No.
What would the term
No
of the
question.
agreement be?
The next fiscal year, another year. Okay. The final one that proposal that we have been presented with, and is the the lot behind the Fusions Salon and Heritage and Creamery and Bookstore. Denise Palomides has, she currently uses the lot for some of her employees to park in, but has offered the town to rent the lot for $800 a month plus her property taxes, which are $279 annually. It's about 20 spaces, and it would be exclusive public use for and all the time. So not just during events, but all 7 days a week. That's the lot right there. Behind, you see this parcel here. People, I'm sure you're familiar with. And so here's the summary of. Kind of already went over this though. Staff does not recommend the option with the Palomides lot. One, because it is, sorry, we've been jumping around. It's not consistent with the parking study really, because it's not a shared parking agreement. It's the town paying for a new surface lot is essentially what's happening. And the parking problem downtown is more about distributing that supply as efficiently as possible, and not about adding really what's net new parking.
Like I asked a question. When you said that first, paving that lot was part of, you said it was like $1,000 a month, but there was paving was a contingency of it too. Is that what I just heard?
Sorry, no, paving, Denise does
Okay,
not want us to
okay,
pave the lot.
Okay, thank you.
She wants us
thought
to leave it flexible.
Okay.
So it's fairly it's also significantly more expensive than the clock shop proposal. But so that's where we are with the Palomides lot. I don't know if you have any questions about that, or any direction that.
Yeah, that's terribly expensive. I'm not in favor of that.
Any other comments? Okay.
Consensus seems not
Okay.
to be, so.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So I understand the direction we'll take on the Women's Club and the clock shop. Before I close, I just wanted to remind the board of some other things that the parking study did recommend. More of some conversation for another time for long-term time limits for downtown parking. Again, it's about efficiently distributing the available supply. So right now, you could technically go out and park in front of Rippington's and leave your car there for 12 hours a day and not even be downtown if you wanted to. Because there's no time limits and there's no enforcement of parking. So that's something, whether it's 15-minute time limits for to-go orders, whether it's 2-hour limits to keep things churning, that's something that the parking study recommended. But there would be an enforcement that would have to accompany that to make that work. Events parking, I talked when I showed that number earlier about the $80,000. That's without charging for events parking. That's the cost annually. If you charged events parking, charge for parking during events, during only those events that attracted more than 5,000 people, which is those four that we talked with the Women's Club about. You could actually have a net gain of the parking study says, I believe it's $150,000 just by charging each car $5. So it's something to think about going forward, and I could provide more details. Additional signage, there's still concerns about people not understanding where to park, and part of this will be addressed later this year through another initiative, some more wayfinding and a downtown smartphone app. And then finally, the TAP grant, the study did call out some safety-related concerns, especially along South Main Street. But fortunately, with the TAP grant, we might be able to work out some of those in the design process. So to conclude, we've talked about the short-term implementation opportunities there, and you've given me some direction. But long-term, we will need to think about those other recommendations.
What's long-term?
I think that would be at the board's discretion.
I have a question.
Yes.
The corner gravel lot that the town owns, I know in the parking study, the recommendation was to utilize that when we were not using events, correct? So why would we not use that lot when it sits empty most of the time when we're not having events?
And that's something that we would have to consider. It's what I've understood from the events division is that providing that as parking on a full-time basis for a couple of reasons could be potentially problematic. One, it would wear away the gravel quicker, and it is a lot that we try to use for people to be able to watch concerts in and things like that, so it could increase maintenance costs. And then there's also a thought that's come up through conversations with some of the Main Street committees of how it would look to just see a bunch of cars right there at that key kind of gateway intersection to downtown. Those are the two reasons that have been discussed, but certainly it's something that we could consider further.
I think that's underutilized, and I think that we should use that lot. If there's not plans, or until we have plans to use it for something else other than events, it's a perfect place to park. I don't have a problem. I wouldn't have a problem seeing cars. We're putting the cars in the other lots adjacent, and it's not really the gateway into Waxhaw. I just think that we're underutilizing something that we should use. It's paid for. We're not paying anybody to use it, or paying the cost to pave someone's lot or pay their taxes. It's there, and if there's some maintenance to fix the gravel, if it's messed up in between the events, I think we need to utilize that lot for parking.
Are there any other comments about that lot specifically?
Yeah, did we
will
not,
say-
we used that lot for the McDonald House dedication for parking, did we not? That was more of a controlled situation that you would have just letting it open to the public.
So, something as to consider as well, and this came up as part of the parking study, is once you kind of set the expectation that that's public parking, at a certain point, if the town ends up deciding to use the lot for something else, then you're taking away parking, at least in the public's eye. So it's something to think about, especially if businesses also make plans, location expansion decisions based on available parking. So it's just one consideration, not saying it's.
Yeah, it would be the same thing with the women's club, though. And people get used to parking there when they see the parking sign, but then when there's an event, it takes it away. So it's here or there.
Sure.
Paul?
I assume we're talking about the Walbrook property, the water tank lot. We put a lot of upfit in that lot about a year and a half ago. It was just number one stone in it, and we actually went back and put crush and run, and we put cinder dust to give it that accent piece. It looks beige and black. If you use it for parking, it's going to move it around a lot, and you're going to have to replenish it almost every year, or probably half a year, because it moves it around because of the weight of the vehicles and the turning. When you turn the vehicle, it moves it. I would be against it, be truthful with you, because it's kind of a nice lot now. If you keep on moving the gravel around, a gravel driveway does the same thing. It disperses to the side as you, I'm sorry, I got a frog in my throat. It disperses to the side, and I'm afraid that's what's going to happen, is the the gravel will disperse around the wheels, and as you turn the wheels, it will move. And then you're gonna have to we brought a roller in and rolled that lot to get it level. Otherwise, you're gonna have ruts in it for events and so forth. I don't know if that's a good idea to mix events and the parking together. We probably could have somebody probably in the Niven Price parking lot directing traffic, and you could get probably twice as much parking in there because there's no lines on it. And you probably could get a lot more parking out of it than we are, because they just park helter-skelter.
So I have a thought in terms of what long-term might be.
Sure.
Like within the next 6 to 9 months as you're putting together the TAP grant, and what downtown's going to look like. It would be nice to have a overall vision for some of these things and how they all interrelate. So we know that the TAP grant design is, kind of creating a ripple effect or vice versa. Because I think there's lots of challenges, and I think that's a great opportunity for us to actually lay out a plan that we can then put in the capital improvement budget and all those kinds of things as we go forward. For instance, I mean, if you had a meeting at the McDonald House last night, and with the truck parked there and somebody coming through, you couldn't get through the street, kind of thing. So there's challenges like that in a number of places, and as you look at that plan, I'd encourage you to define short-term as when you start, or long-term as when you start looking at that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
No.
On this subject?
Any other questions? Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Go sit down, come back up. No.
Make it official.
Next up, Main Street Program, Kurt White. Main Street Program structure, pardon me.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Main Street Program and some recommended changes to the structure. But before I do that, this is very timely. This actually came in today, and I'll pass it around. This is from the National Main Street Center. So this is not the state, but this is actually the National Main Street Center that's part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Sent us this notice of official accreditation that we are accredited as a Main Street America program. This is the first time, first year for that, and so this is it's really the product of a lot of work that's happened with the town from the beginning when the board decided to become a small town Main Street community in 2009, and then all of the kind of the bones and the infrastructure of the program that Lisa Hoffman worked hard to do, and then the volunteer committees who also contributed so many hours to the development of the program. So it's really a testament to the hard work of the town, and we're pretty excited about that. Continued accreditation requires me to provide some annual statistical reports and also some summaries about where our program is and how we're set up. And it's through some of those conversations that I have I've become aware of the need to take kind of the next step in the evolution of the Main Street program. We've gone from a small town Main Street program to a full Main Street starting last year, and our continued evolution as a town and with the program has necessitated that we look at this again. And so the restructure that I'm going to recommend will, one, allow us to continue to enjoy the benefits of accreditation, and it'll also allow the program to, I think, work even more effectively than it has in the past. So that's what I'm going to go over now. Accreditation, what are the benefits? There's many. First of all, training and education. And I think almost all of the board members here have attended some sort of Main Street conference or program, and have gotten to see firsthand some of the training and education that is available from people all over the state and really nationally who are doing some of the same work and have the same similar visions as we have. Secondly, there's the grant opportunities. We have the opportunity to apply for certain grants to benefit downtown, whether they're related to infrastructure or business recruitment efforts. Strategic planning resources for downtown. Main Street provides technical assistance, and they have directly for Waxhaw in the past. I think most of you know Sherry Adams and the work that she did for the town when we were a small town Main Street community. Downtown management.
What you're saying on the grants is that there are certain grants that only Main Street towns can apply for, both through the Commerce Department, North Carolina, and nationally?
That's exactly right.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
There's one called the Main Street Solutions Grant. It's the biggest one. It's annually they allocate about $1 million for the state for that one, for infrastructure, for bringing new businesses to downtown districts.
Yeah, and I think, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 years ago, we had an opportunity at going after one for a couple $100,000, and we weren't structured just exactly right, so we couldn't apply.
Yes, so thank you for that. And so as far as downtown management services, technical assistance, data, this helps me directly. There's a lot of resources that are provided that help me to kind of organize the program, organize our how we look at our property downtown, determine how to work with property owners, figuring out rents, recommended rents, and different things like that have been helpful. The professional network is key, and then finally, strategic communication. What I mean by that is the sheet of paper that I passed out. That sends a message. It sends a message to the development community, sends a message to people who are looking to visit Waxhaw that we are a town who is committed to our downtown, and that's really important. Actually, even as recently as this week, we met with a developer who came in specifically to Waxhaw because they read our downtown vision plan and liked what we were doing, and it differentiated us from some of the other area suburbs of Charlotte. So it's important. We've had a lot of successes in the past year. Hired a retail recruitment consultant and done retail outreach for the first time, in a prescribed way at least. We've completed the parking study, which we just went over. We've implemented a collective marketing strategy with the promotions committee that has included the downtown historic tour app, the First Fridays, and several other initiatives. We've had the design committee has done some key contributions to downtown as far as aesthetically, with your new benches, with the continued banners up from the Junior Art League, and the Duncan McDonald House advising. And then also the OAC has really been instrumental in creating a new volunteer recruitment strategy which benefits all of the committees in town. To help ensure there's going to be people to appoint to the committees. And then also you hired a downtown manager, which I'm personally thankful for. So what I've learned though through my conversations with the North Carolina Main Street this year is that as we made that transition from a small town Main Street to a full Main Street, and at the same time as the state has made some tweaks to how they suggest doing their program, there are certain areas where we are not in sync with best practices. Best practices are the way that the state recommends that Main Street communities operate with their structure, with their funding sources, with their volunteers, their committees, the whole gamut. And that's whether you're an in-house Main Street program like we are, where the town administers the program, or whether you're a separate nonprofit. The state has established best practices. The structure that the state recommends and calls their best practices as of the late fall of 2015 is to have your formal advisory board or board of directors. I'm going to avoid the use of the word committee here to try to not make us get confused. To establish a formal Main Street board of directors. Generally, it's appointed by the town elected body when it is an in-house program, especially like ours is. And however, that those directors are the only members who are actually appointed by the elected officials for most Main Street communities. And what I mean by that is, so you're not the board isn't required to always get into the weeds of every single individual committee and have to handle all of those appointments. It's the Main Street Board of Directors who would then go out and make sure that they had the committees it needed to get its work done.
Or work groups, or
Work groups.
whatever's needed to get, yeah.
Yes, thank you. The Board of Directors would have that discretion to see how to implement its work plan. As far as the role of the Main Street manager, manages and advises the daily operations of the program and really coordinates all the policies and project. And that comes from the National Main Street Standards bylaws, that quote there. So also, it's important to have a vision and a mission, one cohesive vision and mission that's rooted in economic development, because I think a lot of times people forget that Main Street is not events. Main Street is an economic development program that uses promotion as one of its tools for economic development downtown. But design is also a tool it has. Economic restructuring is another tool. And so the vision should be rooted in that at the core. To implement that vision, there needs to be one cohesive work plan that all of those initiatives are carried out through. Usually 3 to 4 strategies, and they're implemented through the Main Street program's 4-point framework, which those 4 points are your you'll recognize them as the names of your 4 Main Street committees as they currently exist: promotion, design, economic restructuring, and organization and advisory. But really only one work plan. So our program, while we've had a lot of successes this year, we've been accredited in 2015. There's some inconsistencies that I'm recommending that we kind of tweak to get us into line with Main Street best practices. First of all, we do have 4 standalone committees. They're really they're separately appointed, and while we've tried and to varying degrees depending on really where we were in the evolution of the program, we've been somewhat successful in keeping them under one kind of vision with the OAC. But when you have 4 separate committees, it's hard when they're operating off of 4 separate work plans to really have a cohesive vision, and for people to really be able to kind of aim towards the same goals downtown. Multiple work plans, as I mentioned, and the direct appointment of all the members by the Board of Commissioners. While definitely understand what the original logic was behind that, and it worked for a while, I think. But as we've gone on, it's again, it goes back to that, making sure that everyone is kind of operating under the same vision and the same economic development plan. So to bring the program more in line with best practices, a proposed structure would look more like this. We would have a Main Street Board of Directors that could be appointed by the town board that would operate under one cohesive economic development vision and mission. We'd really try to bring it in a little bit. We've got probably a total of 35 items on all the work plans right now. We'd really want to bring that down to something much more manageable, even if we have multiple things under a few umbrellas. But 4 key economic development strategies, and these will be carried out through the 4-point framework: promotions, economic restructuring, organization, and design. So not 4 separate committees, but those would be the guiding principles of how the work would be carried out. The Board of Directors would utilize volunteers to implement in the work plans. The volunteers would not be official committee, board-appointed members. They would be volunteers. And what this really does, it allows people, it really kind of frees up the volunteers to really put their passion into what they're most interested in. It allows you to kind of dip in and dip out as you see initiatives that really interest you. Instead of having to attend a committee meeting 12 times a year, you're really able to use your expertise when it's needed, and it actually really increases the total number of soldiers on the ground that we have. And we have a lot of these volunteers in the community right now who I speak with regularly, who help us with conversations in the community. So our existing work plans that we have, and that's the first question that comes up is, what about all the work that we did on these work plans and the budgets we established for them? They can still be implemented under this framework if that's the direction the board wanted to go. Because we would just kind of house them up under the economic development strategies for this first year that the board of directors established. How it looks on paper, this is Lenore, North Carolina's work plan. As you see, they have one work plan here for the whole Main Street program. And you have your economic development goals here on the far left column, but they're implemented through the 4 points. And that's how it looks in practice. Don't want to get too bogged down in that. I think you have it in your packets, but I'll be happy to answer any questions when we get to the end. Now, I should have said here what this could do instead of what this will do, because we're just looking for some. This is still just a concept, but essentially, most importantly, it ensures continued accreditation with North Carolina Main Street, because it puts us directly in line with their best practices. Secondly, it really does increase our ability to make an impact downtown. As I mentioned in one of my first slides, we've had a lot of successes just in this fiscal year, a long time before I got here too. But it's really there's been a lot of questions, even amongst the Main Street committees. Where are we going there? What's the vision here? What are we trying to make downtown look like? What are we trying to make it? What is its brand? What are we trying to be known for? And it's hard when you have 4 separate committees to really get your head around that. What it doesn't have to do, it doesn't have to necessitate creation of new work plans. Again, we did a pretty good job this year with whittling our work plans down from previous years, so they're manageable as they are, and it doesn't have to preclude participation in downtown activities by current Main Street committee members. Again, we're looking for volunteers. Not everyone would be on the board of directors, but it would not work without people's continued willingness to volunteer with us. So that's the next steps. Is if the board agrees and kind of has the consensus to go forward, then there's a lot of details to work out, but there are bylaws that are already established by the state. We wouldn't have to start from scratch. We could tweak them as needed, and we could select members of the board of directors. We've got about 33 applications for the Main Street committees that came in. So there's applications already on the table that we could consider, and then I would return with a more detailed proposal at that time. I know that's a lot to.
Commissioner
Aaron, hit on?
Fitzgerald.
Yes.
All right. I want to make sure I got this perfectly clear. So you're going to take, the board of directors is going to be only board there is, and then you're going to have one member of each of this board of directors direct. One directs organization, one directs promotion, one directs design, and one directs economic restructuring or development. So there will be similar boards as what are committees as we have them now, but they won't be called a board. They'll be just called a committee.
So yes, that's one of the ways to do it.
Is that what you're proposing, or is it you're just proposing to do away with all the committees we have and just have one board?
What I'm proposing is to, well, we can just go ahead and say that so it's clear. Do away with all the committees as we currently have them, but the board of directors at first would implement the economic development goals utilizing those 4 points, but I wouldn't necessarily envision one person to be in charge of promotion, one person to be in charge of design, one person to be in charge of economic restructuring. It doesn't have to be like that, because it can be, if you look here.
Were you thinking, have you thought of how many you would need?
Between 9 and 15 is common. So if the idea is to be more fluid with the board of directors, again, instead of having at the risk of having silos again, if you have a goal, let's say the goal was improve downtown parking, there is a way to do that through promotions. There's a way to do that through design, and there's a way to do that through your economic restructuring, and organization, because that's building partnerships. So it's not really 4 committees anymore. It's just using those 4 themes to get your work done. So the first year, no, I do not envision 4 separate committee heads, but as it evolved, it might go to that if the board of directors decided that was needed.
Currently, with the boards and committees as we have them designed right now, we have a lot more members, correct?
Yes.
So you're going to be narrowing down this board to a more precise board.
That's exactly right.
Would you use these other members for external use?
Yes.
So they would be associate members. They wouldn't have a voting on the board, but they would be associate members. So there'd be like a subcommittee? Would you suggest, I don't understand if we don't really need any more because we're going to need less, is what you're saying, because we're going to have about 15 maximum, right?
Yes.
And we probably have about
30.
35 people now, so that's half of them.
That's right.
So we're going to cut basically our volunteer staff in half.
Can I say,
Is that what I'm
so
seeing?
this is-
I understand that because it makes it easier, more precise, because everybody knows what's going on, because you don't have historic not knowing what design's doing.
Right.
And you don't know, economic doesn't know what historic's doing or design's doing, but everybody would know, promotions knows what everybody's doing. I understand that, but I want to make sure I got it straight.
so this is coming from the Main Street folks in Raleigh, that we need to have some structure that's similar to this and go and move away from the structure we have. So yes, we're going to consolidate, but the board can determine the members. There would be no more silos of the 4 committees, but the one committee, the board of directors, would be responsible for all 4, and they can engage folks from the public as they see fit, that whether they be former committee members or whatnot. So that would be their discretion. But at the end of the day, there are going to be at least half as many formal members of Main Street, the new Main Street Committee, than there are today. Yes.
So it wouldn't stop if you have a maximum of 15 directors on the board, then it wouldn't eliminate the folks that are not chosen to be volunteers under that? Or how does that volunteer, you mentioned volunteers, how is that going to work, and how will that be structured?
You're asking, would people still be able to volunteer and be part of the projects? Or
Right.
Is that what's?
Well, you mentioned volunteers. What is that structure for volunteers if a board of directors is set up?
Right. So initially, they would be volunteers. And that doesn't mean they are not committee members. They're volunteers in the community who want to volunteer to be part of the Waxhaw Main Street program. How that looks right now, for example, it's already happening to a certain extent with the First Fridays, or we did the dog parade a few weeks ago. We had a lot of folks in the community, downtown business owners, who were eager to help with that project, that were approached by Main Street Committee members, official Main Street Committee members, and on the promotions committee, and who were then asked to volunteer for that. And we had a lot of success with that model. We actually ended up with more people than we would have had if we would have tried to limit it to just official Main Street members.
So here's what I heard you say. You're being kind. Main Street is telling us to up our game. They are saying this is about Main Street economic revitalization, and you guys are down in the weeds playing with projects. Put a board of directors in place, and in the next 90 days, create a very detailed vision that these board of directors are going to cascade out into projects, reach out to volunteers, and move forward. But the board is really moving forward on what we haven't been doing, which is really focused on building a plan for the revitalization of downtown, whatever that means, because we don't have anything like that in place. We have individual projects. It's not a reflection on anything that anybody's done or anything like that. In actuality, Main Street gave us the suggestion for the structure we have right now last April. So I mean, it's a natural evolution, but they're just saying, let's up this game for everybody that has one of these. And we've talked about it, and we've now got piece parts in that, A, the Waxhaw Economic Development Corporation is in a hibernation period. I've validated that. They are not going to come out of hibernation for a while. They got a few other things. The people that are participating on, many of them are gone, and then the chair has a school to get open and do some things. We have to figure out the relationship with the Union County EDC and what, if any, role they have to play in here. But there's one heck of a lot of work to get done to then create these projects, et cetera, going forward.
That's very accurate, yes.
Okay. And my only other comment would be, if you're going to put a board in place, I would recommend to our board that we have an ex officio member on it to stay linked with it if it's about economic development. That's exactly the way the Waxhaw Economic Development Corporation was set up. We assigned a board member to stay engaged and bring it back. I mean, that's very common practice in a economic revitalization. And so that's what I heard you say, but what I take a little bit exception to is we're not going to, I would hope that we're not just creating a new board and keeping the same plans, that we're actually going to get aggressive and up our game. That's all.
Sure.
So we can keep that smiley face next to the new Main Street manager. Other questions? Paul?
Well, last year, we rolled basically all our boards and committees really into the Main Street program is what we did in facto.
Yep.
So we have a couple boards and committees that are not on this, like Parks and Rec. We have Historic. Where would that fall? We have the Board of Adjustments. We got Board of ABC Board, and we have the Planning Board. Do we tie them with them, or do we separate them out again? Because we actually put them in, but we're taking them out.
They stay the same unless the board chooses to change something.
Well, statutorily, the Board of Adjustments, the Planning Board has to stay
Right.
where they are. I don't hear Natalie asking for integration into the Main Street. It's up to them to work together, I would imagine, but
That's right.
I think, and Historic would stay, Historic's a statutory one as well, so that would stay. Yeah. Other questions?
Who's going to develop the vision, the mission, the goals? Do you expect that to be a joint effort by this board and the board of directors?
Well, I would say, first of all, I would say that there's been a lot of, I think we have vision statements all over the place in all of our plans, especially related to downtown. And so I wouldn't want to kind of step back and go through a process starting from scratch. I think it's more taking what's out there, what's already gone through kind of your citizen reviewed process and or citizen input processes and go ahead and take from that and build your vision from that. I don't see us inviting someone from Main Street and starting all over and that sort of thing.
No, I don't mean that at all, Kurt. What I mean is, do you see this board working with the newly created board of directors to establish or, gather together all the vision statements and so forth that are out there and come back with something that this board says, yep, that's what we want you guys to be working on? In other words, don't let us off the hook.
Right. So I think the Main Street, I would envision the Main Street Board of Directors to be the one to actually cobble it all together and get the vision. But again, since they are actually appointed by the Board of Commissioners, there would be that natural dialogue back and forth.
Other questions? Jim?
No, I have nothing. Sounds good.
Would we still ask for semi-annual or quarterly reports from the Main Street program? Basically, that's what we've been asking for all the boards and committees for this past year. Is we wanted basically semi-annual report to what projects you got coming up and what projects you see envision coming forward and the money of what you need. And I just want to know if that would happen or.
I think so. Yeah, I mean that's a good idea. Yes.
I agree with Mayor Meyer about the board, one board member or two, staying involved and coming back to the rest on an alternating basis, not the same one. You know, say maybe one will take 6 months or 3 months and then alternating. But I think it's important to keep that connection there and keep with the Board of Commissioners.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
I think what would help is if you got not just the work plan, because that doesn't differentiate from what we've been doing. It just kind of restructures that spreadsheet.
Right.
But I think if you, first of all, I think it's great that you're getting the input from Main Street, and they're politely telling us to up our game. They've been involved all along, and so that's good. I think if you maybe took, you said Lenore or Morganton or Belmont, and I think if you brought back to us and showed us kind of what their board of directors actually produced to then move the ball forward, I think it would help us to see what the board's doing and then what the specific activities are that you need a whole host of volunteers on. That was an eye-opener to me when I visited a couple towns a year ago. And you could see where this structure was going to have to go towards. But it's hard to see it when we're sitting here. The only thing we see is a work plan.
Right.
It's hard to envision economic revitalization with the minuscule budget we put towards those work plans. I mean, it doesn't compute. So something's got to give back to get us to where we see where you're going on that. But I understand where you're going. I think it's time to keep moving.
Okay. Thank you.
Other thoughts though? That's just one person's opinion.
Back to the volunteer, I want to get it straight. So the directors on the board, the volunteers would be just for specific events, like
Or tasks.
it would
or
not
initiatives.
be a regular set of volunteers that you would call on, or just you would have a list of people. How would that work?
Yeah, and yes.
Because I don't want to I don't want it to seem like we're taking the public and the citizens out of feeling like they have a part and a say-so in what's going on downtown, and some may look at that as that way. I just want to make sure we don't do that and we make it clear.
Yes, it's definitely a valid concern. So part of what the OAC has been working on this year is getting a really solid group of volunteers kind of ready to go who have already expressed interest in volunteering for the town, not necessarily on committees, but volunteers. And I would foresee that continuing. And then also I think it's just in how we communicate it, that really you're part of the Main Street program. Everyone who wants to volunteer and be part of it is part of it. Whether you're on the board of directors or not is just a different kind of way of classifying it.
Okay, thanks.
So, are there any other questions?
So what are you looking for?
Well, so what I'm hearing is that the what I've generally outlined here is supported, but what you would like is me to come back with an example of how some other Main Street towns have done it, like this, with more specificity about how their board of directors is set up, organized, what projects they do, and then just with more detail around the proposed Waxhaw structure. Is that what I'm?
Yeah, I think certainly example of the bylaws or a draft of the bylaws. I'm a little bit hesitant to just select members from current applicants because I don't know what you're looking. Personally, don't know what skill set you're looking for. A board, board level versus a project level are could be dramatically different skill sets. And, you know, it would be nice to see what, maybe Main Street's got some examples of
They do.
here's the skill sets that
Yep.
we need on these people. So we're putting the right people on this board and not just filling slots, so to speak. Because if we're going to do it, let's do it right, kind of thing. Not that you were suggesting.
No, and you're right, they do. They do have suggested skill sets, and really those skill sets revolve around the 4 points.
Yeah.
So I think the applicant pool is fairly strong that we have right now. But if we needed to
Yeah, well, we haven't seen it, so we don't know. So that's all.
okay, yep.
Can you have that for the 12th, the next meeting?
The proposed members of that board,
Just-
or
Just some of this information so we could continue the discussion.
yes.
Okay.
I'm very supportive of what you got done so far, but I would recommend on a board, less is more. 15 would be pretty hard to get them going in the same direction. 12 is about the maximum on a board that I've seen that's workable. I could see 12 and then possibly 2 members from this committee, this board, to be on there as just advisors, not really as board members. And I could see yourself, so that would be a total of 15 people. That's what I could see, but you do what you want to do.
Sure. No, it's
I think
that's
15
well
is a little much, because you get a hard time to get direction, sharp direction.
Yeah, just to give you a perspective, the Waxhaw EDC had 9. I believe the Union County Economic Development, which is a similar structure, has either 9 or, to your point, 11. They don't go higher than that. And I think,
Pretty hard to get
yeah,
15 people going the same direction.
so, just for what it's worth. Other questions?
Make a quick statement. One of the ways that we can get in the bylaws to have other people involved is to have express authority to form subcommittees, and then they could formally have a subcommittee and name some of these other volunteers, so therefore they would be on a committee but not on the board, which kind of gives them a little bit more authority and more formality, and I think that could keep some of the people appointed on subcommittees from their prior designated areas of expertise. So that may be another way to keep people involved.
I'll speak for Warren here. Just be careful how you structure that because of the stipend schedule. I mean, 200 volunteers getting $25,
Yeah,
on a
I
weekly
agree.
basis, that could get them.
I think that would be a subcommittee, and it wouldn't be a true appointed committee by the
Just
board.
throwing
So,
the caution
but that's a good point that we'll need to work with drafting.
The current Economic Development Corporation that we have in place, could that be absorbed into the Main Street program so that they would have 501c3 that they could go out on their own and purchase land and develop things?
The recommendation right now is to let it sit and hibernate. It's a separate, not-for-profit. I would, what we were asked in talking with the chair, and I actually validated this with Chris Platte from Union County, come up with your plan to see what you need a not-for-profit, and then we'll react as to what we could do. Because you're right, and what some main streets do is they transition it over to a separate 501c3, and then it comes out of the town structure. So you're on, I understand what you're getting at, yeah,
Same but different.
yeah.
With our current committees that we have, we've should they continue to operate, or would you suggest they kind of get on hold again right now? We didn't meet in June pending this conversation. We've got approved budgets and work plans, but might make sense to wait a month.
Chaplain, if we extended a month, do we need a motion tonight to extend boards and committee positions a month? Because I think they all, whoever expires in June.
Which is
2 days.
2 days.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, and why don't, since
We can just add it
Why don't we
as
add that on,
a new business item tonight.
yes, at the next meeting to make it formal where it's at.
So tonight's meeting.
Yes,
So you'll write over your 15-minute dinner a little.
got it.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
thanks.
thank you very much.
Moving right along. Discussion on planning board. It says here the presenter is the manager and the board, so how would you two like to go?
I can start on
You
it.
three, I'm sorry.
All right. I have contacted 5 different towns, two of which are around 10 or 11,000 people. The other 3 are our size or a little bit larger. Basically, they all perform the same kind of functions that our planning board does. There are some variations amongst them. Clayton, for example, the conditional use permits only go to the Board of Adjustment. They don't go to the planning board. Or if you see Belmont, Belmont and 2 others have extraterritorial jurisdiction that they obtain from their county. So does Clayton. And the county will grant that. Then they have members from areas within 1 mile of their town. They all work on comprehensive plans. They all work on UDOs. They all work on the same tasks of rezonings and so forth. Even with the variations amongst them, the one thing that I found that was consistent throughout was when I repeated to them Jim Prosser's suggestion about how we select the members of the planning board and how we as a board select the chair of the planning board or the chair of the Board of Adjustments, they all thought that was a great idea. They want to call back and see how it works. So having said that, we're pretty much like everybody else. They thought the idea of the training that Jim suggested was superb, and they liked the idea of being a lot more active in the selection of members.
So what would you like to do? Warren?
I've got I talked to the Central Carolina Council of Government, and they're going to submit a proposal. I mean, they're familiar with kind of the structure and the procedures of our planning board, and they understand best practices related to those things. They're going to submit a proposal on what they might be able to do to assist us in making some tweaks and improvements to the way the planning board operates. And I'm awaiting that, and if it's okay with the board, once I get it, I'll bring it forward, and we can use that as a starting point. Is that fair enough? Okay.
Chaplain?
Just to throw a wrench in things, the planning board can have even more expanded authority than are in the statutes where they say planning board, which I find ironic. But in the Board of Adjustment statute, and this is just things to think about, you can actually have your planning board function as your Board of Adjustment. There's already the mention of the conditional use permit. Those can actually be not only as an advisory either through the Board of Adjustment or Planning Board, but also the final decision. That can get pretty broad. There's also subdivision plat approval, and that's something that should be thought of as the UDO rewrite continues, because we don't see that many plat approvals, but a lot of them are moving to us either on a staff level or through one of the other entities. The final entity that can be combined, but it gets a little tricky, is the Historic Commission can also be combined, but there you have to have at least 3 Planning Commission members with the special expertise, which gets kind of hard to have somebody with expertise in the zoning and then the historical, archaeological, and other matters. But there's other ways to restructure as well, and they're out there. Not suggesting any of them, but just wanted that to be part of your thought process.
Beyond the list of functions that the legislature allows, and what Chaplain has just talked about, what's the sense of the other board members here as to what we would like to see the planning board do? And I'm not going to put you on the spot right now, but we as a board need to decide what we want the planning board to do. And would it help to modify the list that I sent out, modify it, simplify it, and maybe add what Chaplin is talking about also, and then come back in a few days and say, this is what I would like them to do, this is what I would like them to do, and have a consensus of the board as to what we want that planning board to do.
I mean, I would probably start with what we have in place as a town that says what the responsibilities are. And then perhaps do we add, subtract from there? We have that list. It's in place. It was approved last year. And I don't know that we've refined it that much, but probably needs to be, we start there, because that's the expectation today. And are they fulfilling that role today is a question. And I think some people have different opinions of that. And are we expecting too much? What training? All that kind of stuff. I know at times there's been the suggestion that an attorney be present to facilitate the discussion, because these things get complex. I mean, all those things I think we need to probably coalesce around as a board fairly quickly.
Steve, I'm in agreeance with you. I'm in agreeance with you, but I think we also need to have the structure of the Board of Adjustments too. If we possibly could roll both into one, is basically what they're saying. It could be one board instead of being two separate ones. And it may just cause, because the Board of Adjustments, they really don't meet that often. They maybe meet
Twice a year.
once or twice a year,
Yeah.
whatever comes up. And it's kind of putting people on hold that are actually could probably help us on the planning board. And I think that maybe it could be one unit instead of two separate entities.
Given where the state legislature's going with the Board of Adjustments, never mind. Well, that's for another time. Chaplain, just a curiosity question. So if they're one and the same, and the planning board has ruled on something, and then they handle their own appeal, how does that work? And just from an applicant, a customer's perspective, how do we stay in the right side of fairness there?
Correct. Well, the Board of Adjustment doesn't have appellate rights over another board, and it doesn't have appellate rights with the Board of Commissioners, and vice versa. Board of Commissioners can't overrule the Board of Adjustment. It's usually from a final decision of a planning staff member, of a zoning administrator. So it would still be separate
You
enough.
just need to clarify it so it's real clear.
Well, the UDO would have to have a lot of, this would be a big undertaking.
Right.
Because all of the UDO has references regarding an appeal to the Board of Adjustment. And we may simplify it by calling it the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment, for a Band-Aid if you wanted to. But there's a lot of areas. The combination right now does sound like a good idea. And that's why I mentioned it, because I do know they only meet a few times a year. One thing that I would question, though, is as the town grows, are there going to be more variance applications? Are there going to be more appeals? I don't know. And you did mention
The UDO is going to be so crystal clear, according to Lisa McCarter, that we won't need any variance requests.
wonderful. Then, with the UDO rewrite, that may be a time really to consider and look into that.
I'm not trying to put your staff on the spot more. I'm just,
That's the goal.
that's the goal. That's right. Okay. Last item on the agenda, just a general discussion, since tonight we approved the budget, or we have 2 days of meetings to get to approval. Any discussion on any questions, changes, et cetera, that we need to accommodate? We put this on just to make sure that we could all have an opportunity to get anything out there to warn for tonight. Go ahead.
No, I don't now. I talked to Warren and
Oh, okay.
he was able to answer my question.
One thing I want to put out there, I'd like to suggest a standard approach to outside agencies. I dug into how do we do it, got with Chaplin, found this was like the TIA, was something that was talked about in 2009 and 2010, and the ordinance was never approved on, or a policy was never approved on the outside agency. So while it doesn't have to be a part of the budget, I would like to suggest we get some consensus that probably a good idea that the town manager take a look at that and get that in front of us, and we finally have an ordinance and a policy in place to guide that, and even perhaps comes back with an assessment of the current list against that to kind of give us an idea of where we are, even though it it's after the fact. But
Policy
Yeah.
and regulations, because we really have no regulations. Whoever comes and puts one in, we have to look at.
right.
I mean, that's kind of, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we don't have, the ordinance was drafted, it was never approved, and does everybody think that's a good idea? I mean, okay.
Could I say something about
Yeah.
that? And something I've always had a concern about that is that we are just a small part of Union County, and a lot of these agencies are not providing much to us. I mean, to be selfish about it, they're providing things to a community, which we should be serving our neighbors. But at the point, we're also representing the taxpayers from the town of Waxhaw, not somebody that's 100 yards outside of town to get those benefits. I don't think they're appropriately, a lot of these people should be coming to us.
I totally agree with you, Jim, but I also would like us to look at the percentage that actually goes to people to get services, because a lot of it goes to payroll. And I don't think that's what we're here for. We're here to give it to services for people, not for payroll for their people.
All the reason to
Yes.
get that procedure in place. It's evolved. All right. Any other questions around the budget that anybody wants to get out before tonight? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. See you in an hour and 15 minutes.
What happened to that one?
Did you see this here? I just got it during a